Good evening. My name's Monique Rizay-Faccioni. I'm the Senior Curator of Public Programs here at ACMI. Before I begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today, the people of the Kulin Nation. I pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging, and extend that welcome to all First Nations people present today. So today, it's the day where we listen, we think, we question and we celebrate. And I'm so pleased that you're all here to celebrate with us. As the Australian Museum of the Moving Image, we value equality, inclusion and diversity. We seek to challenge stereotypes and champion women and gender diverse audiences. And we're really pleased you're here with us today while we do that. I'd like to thank our panellists, the musicians and artists and makers who have contributed to the success of this evening. And of course, please join us after this panel for wonderful DJ sets, drinks, dancing that will follow this talk. I hear the sets are going to be amazing. I'd like to also introduce now our delightful host. They're all laughing because they were checking their lists at the back there. So I'd like to introduce our delightful host, Leila Gurruwiwi, who will tell you more about herself and her story, as will each of the panellists tonight. A small note that Nayuka is just running a little late and will join us shortly. But before I hand to Leila, I noticed a poem that was sent today, My Feminism, by celebrated author and poet Maxine Benham Clark, and you might have read it today as well. And just an excerpt. My feminism seeks to lift all women up. My feminism must be strong enough. My feminism is strong, fierce, burning, alive. My feminism will be smart, intersectional, and kind. Please join with me in welcoming Leila and our esteemed panel.
Good evening, everyone. How are we feeling today? Oh, goodness me. I think we've got to try that again. How are we feeling today? Happy International Women's Day, everybody. Yes, big round of applause for that. And there's so many wonderful things going on here, so please make sure after our talk here today that you stick around and hang out, and you'll probably be able to ask questions to all of us after as well. There is going to be a Q&A as well, but my name is Laurel Ridialpi Mindali Gurruwiwi. Most people know me as Leila Gurruwiwi from the Margaret Footy Show. And before we begin, as a proud Yolngu woman, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land that we are on tonight, the Boonwurrung and the Wurundjeri of the Kulin Nation. I would also like to acknowledge all the clans that make up the Kulin Nation, pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and also acknowledge all other Indigenous people that are in the room tonight. So I've worked on Margaret Footy Show for the last 11 years, since I was 19 years old. Basically 6 months out of high school, it's all I've really known what to do. Out of that, I've also been able to do other things. I've dabbled in acting and been in a theatre play, been in writers' workshops, get to sit on panels and also moderate panels. So it's all been pretty exciting. And for the last few years, I've also worked at the Pavilion School, which is an alternate school in East Preston, as the Indigenous support worker supporting Indigenous kids that don't fit into the normal mainstream schooling system. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell. So to our next speaker.
Hi everyone, is this audible? Yeah,
Yep.
Great. My name is Atong Atem. I'm a South Sudanese woman. I'm an artist and a sometimes writer. A lot of the work that I do kind of comes from growing up in this country but not being from this country, and sort of reacting to the kind of education I wasn't given as an artist in ways that I've learnt to, educate myself. So a lot of my visual art is in response to what I want to see and how I want to be seen. And through that comes a lot of incidental activism, I suppose. Like, I wouldn't necessarily call myself an intentional activist, but by being somebody who lives in a politicized body and all of that, like, you know, roll with the punches and make it work for me as much as I can through a lot of my visual work and my writing. That's me in a nutshell.
I love these little claps. Hi, I'm Bhenji. Bhenji Ra. I am a dancer originally, but now I do everything. Also the mother of the House of Slay, and we're a family and community based in mostly Western Sydney, but we're like all moving into the inner west now, so we're like really bougie. So we're based in Gadigal land, and yeah, I think most of my work is like kind of like dancing between a lot of like being responsible for all my daughters and sons, and also being an artist in my own right, and kind of like really trying to carve out a space for us that's by us and that we're not invited to. I think that's kind of like really the core of our work at the moment, is trying to figure out or trying to negotiate how we have agency and what that actually looks and feels like, you know, emotionally as well, and to own something and to have it and to feel affirmed by it as well. Yeah, that's me in a nutshell. I'll tell you more later.
Hi, my name's Lisi Kane. I am a lead producer at a studio called League of Geeks. We're actually a video game company, so we're around 25 people, and we actually have a diversity split of about 50%, 40 to 50%, which is well above the norm, and it's something that I've been part of and very excited to be a part of. Outside of that, I also am the co-founder of an organisation called Girl Geek Academy, and we're a social good company that are encouraging more women and young girls to help build the internet, do things techie, build video games and all that fun stuff. And we're about to announce a new program next week actually for early career women in games, which is very, very exciting.
Hi everyone, my name's Santilla Chingaipe and I'm a journalist and a filmmaker, and a lot of my work explores migration, cultural identities and politics, and that's me.
So, first question, nice easy one. What does International Women's Day mean to you?
That's not an easy question.
I think for me, it's two things. Firstly, it's a massive celebration. Personally, for me, I get to celebrate being a woman and what that means. And secondly, on the not so fun side, it's where I get to laugh and see all the corporates make very big mistakes and see them all show their true colours. And I find that very, very funny. That's what it is to me.
What are their true colours?
Some of them just don't. I swear some of them don't even ask a woman or ask anyone to proofread some of their copy. And obviously I don't know, am I allowed to get political? Obviously what our Prime Minister said today as well, which was really cool. But yeah, that's kind of like, I actually haven't been on the internet today, so I'm going to do that after this. I'm going to look at the hashtag.
But you were actually on the App Store today.
Yeah, so I very self-consciously am on the App Store today, if you don't look at it. So I was very, very lucky to be approached by Apple to be included in their Women's History Month celebration, and that was awesome. So I'm in the Today tab, and that's great. But obviously that comes with online harassment, which has been awesome and fun, but also very empowering because it makes me really, really angry, which I feel a lot of this stuff that we will probably talk about today, it's exciting, but it's also like using anger to empower me and keep me going. But yeah, it was a very nice message that I got from a gentleman called Rob from Queensland. It was a very
Rob.
Yeah, very kind words, Rob.
What about the rest of the panel? What does International Women's Day mean to you?
I feel like for me, it makes me think of, similar to what you said, corporates and like conglomerates that are trying to sort of cash in on a momentum that exists without necessarily doing the hard work that comes with, you know, supporting a group of people. But I think for me, having been in Melbourne only a few years and seeing a lot of grassroots activism, it's changed my perspective and it's changed my relationship even to institutions, seeing that it's possible for an institution to do the right thing when they listen, and to have even an event like this that has such a diverse group of people on the stage talking and being heard. So it's kind of it's an evolving, I think International Women's Day for me, what it means to me, is something that constantly evolves with the way that politics evolves and the way that our engagement as people on the ground or as individuals evolves. It's good and bad,
I always wake up on these days and feel a little bit exhausted, and I get a little bit anxious around I guess when people are, just for me personally, when people are kind of looking at you as someone who is kind of not of the white cis normative womanhood canon, looking for you to speak or to say something, and that often makes me feel pressured in a way, or having to say something. And I think that's interesting, just thinking about that then, that it hasn't always been spent on my community, and I think I want to spend these days with my girls, and I'm not I'm here speaking about what it means to be a woman for myself, and I think that maybe that is a shift that I can personally think about in my life, but also the conversations that come out at the end of the day are sometimes really nourishing, and we get places and we go somewhere that we may not have gone last year or the years before, and I think that's really special, and I will take that, and I'm sure my girls are listening somewhere as well.
Santilla?
My relationship with International Women's Day, it's very complicated. I wrote something today for the Wheeler Centre, which is kind of interrogating these these same issues, and I feel like International Women's Day has been hijacked by, and this is not I'm trying to find a simple word to say this, but there really is, and I'm going to be very academic-y when I say this, but capitalism, really. This idea of why the day started has completely been lost. I mean, when we're talking about gender inequality, and why women for centuries have been advocating for equal opportunities, it's traditionally been led by working class women. So whether you're looking at the women that eventually started, the uprisings that led to the Russian Revolution in 1919, whether you're talking about the riots in Nigeria, they're called the Abaz Women's Riots, and these women, really lobbied for change within their community that forced political change because they felt like they weren't being treated equally. And when you then move forward and you see examples of that in history where working class women have essentially argued that, we need to be seen and we have to be treated equally, and then to see corporations and to see so-called feminist icons who are incredibly wealthy on a day like today spew forth vague things like, smash the patriarchy, shatter glass ceilings. Meanwhile, they get to make money off of that, and they can use it as a marketing thing, while millions and millions of women still, many of them live below the poverty line. Many of them will never see a life outside of that entrenched poverty cycle. And thinking about my role in that as a consumer, as a woman, recognizing that every choice that I make in some way either hinders or helps another sister, and thinking about why don't we have conversations about tangible solutions on International Women's Day? It's wonderful to be in a room with women and to celebrate being a woman. I think it's fantastic and it's awesome. But it's also that reality that, a lot of us are still being held back, and this of all days should be the day when we do that, and not talk about, why there are not enough women on boards or whatever, as though that's what every woman is aspiring for, when in this country alone, there are women that can't even get employed because of barriers that are blocking them. So I'm like, well, you want to talk about boards? I want to talk about why can't some women get a job? But that's my complicated relationship with International Women's Day.
I like it. So feminism has become more popular or a part of the mainstream in recent years, partially due to #MeToo and also #TimesUp. What are the positive changes that you perceive have emerged from this, and what are what is problematic and difficult with these hashtags and feminism becoming more popular or a part of the mainstream space?
I think it really kind of tails off of what Santilla said really well, in that I think a lot of the way that we consume feminist media is sort of media that's designed to appeal to the broadest section of the community, which means it's going to be the most tangible, the least in-depth or whatever, like something that will appeal to all of us and maybe make us feel good, as opposed to make us question, think, or like, you know, acknowledge ways that we've messed up. And there was another panel I was on today where we had a very similar question, but specifically about intersectional feminism. And I think part of my frustration with feminism TM, which I'm repeating a term that I use, but that's okay, and intersectionality TM, like these things that have become corporatized, is with an ease of access in the ways that they're presented to us means like a watering down of the intensity of what those things mean. Like intersectionality was a term created by a black woman who's, again, I've forgotten her name, I literally wrote it down. Kimberl Crenshaw, thank you so much, people who pay attention. And Kimberl Crenshaw's reason for coming up with the term intersectionality was really academic, but also came specifically from her experience as a black woman in America, as an African-American woman, with that context, with, you know, a colonial history within that context as well. And with that comes a lot of stuff. And I think my frustration with feminism as a consumable, marketable concept is that it's gotten rid of the stuff and tried to find a core, but you can't have a core without the stuff. It's like, you know, it's a hollow concept otherwise. And I'm sort of, really frustrated with like feel-good feminism and this whole, you know, girl power and you can do it and feel great and it's pink, so it's relevant. Because I don't think that actually appeals to anyone. I think we've been told that it should appeal to us, but I don't really think that anyone gets anything out of it. And especially when, the heaviness of these concepts mean that we can dig into a tangible way of relating to things that we care about, and that we can unpack things and like be actually, beyond performativity. We can actually do things, and looking at things from like a, bottom-up approach or a bottom-up perspective, I think benefits all of us, in that when the most oppressed or the least looked out for people in a community are uplifted and supported and thought about and centered, like everybody will benefit. And when feminism doesn't teach or speak that, especially to a younger generation, I think then it fails, personally.
Yeah.
It's just a small comment, but I was just thought about like that the accessibility to that capitalist feminism, and that you have to be able to fit this kind of box that is easily packaged and consumed and likable on the gram or Twitter or whatever, and that so much language gets lost, so much information, so much history, but also so many bodies and identities are also erased within that. And I think that it just keeps on homogenizing this canon of feminism to something that only exists within like this internet sphere or something, when we really should be thinking about, ancestral feminism or like genealogy and who were the women like for us historically, and that is uncomprehendable. And I think that it's good that it's uncomprehendable and that it can slip away from English language and all of these things, because that is like, for me at least, that's the core of intersectionality, that it's, that it's beyond that it's beyond this Western canon, and it hits me in a spiritual way, and it nourishes me as well, emotionally and physically. Yeah.
I think in my industry specifically, there's been a lot of positives. So for the video game industry, kind of similar to the film industry, it's had to really take a hard look at itself and realize how bad it is. And being a creative industry, it's not just about technology, it is a creative medium. There's been a lot of push within, especially locally in Australia, but also internationally, for people to actually look at their companies and have diversity policies and actually look at fixing some of those issues. There are obviously some good changes there, which I've started to see. It's awesome. The CEOs and the top of all these companies are still run by white rich men, which is, they just need to, we just need to get past that first, I think, to make some big changes. But given our consumers, on the flip side of that, our players and our community there, it's actually the whole idea of feminism TM, which I love. I'm going to start using that. Feminism TM is this whole the whole issue of feminism is actually dividing our players and actually making them incredibly angry. You've probably heard a lot about how there's a lot of angry young boys playing video games, also with internet accounts, and the cause and effect is actually starting to see this shift. So I don't know where it's going to go, which is really interesting. But we have games like Battlefield recently decided to put female soldiers into the game, and they're also part of the cover art that's used. And boy, did people get angry about that. Like, that's incredibly normal. Like, it is, women were in the war, women were part of the world war, and it's also a video game. Like, it's also not necessarily, you're not going to watch an academic, piece on the breakdown of World War II. You're going to shoot some people and then that's it. But it's actually dividing a lot of the audience and like causing a lot of people to get very, very angry and do horrible things. There's been a lot of, obviously, like things like doxing and online abuse and stuff like that of game developers just trying to make games, which is then causing women to leave the industry. So it's very like a whirlwind at the moment. It's the flash fire before hopefully everything gets reborn again, but I don't know where it's going. It's all very tiring.
Everyone, Nayuka.
Sorry, I told you I wasn't going to let them start with they just started.
Hello. I can't remember the question, Leila.
Yeah,
Sorry.
That's all right. So I was just saying, and Nayuka, for you as well, feminism has become more popular or quite mainstream in recent years, and partially due to hashtag Me Too and also hashtag Time's Up. What are the positive changes that you perceive has emerged from this, but also what is problematic and difficult with this?
Oh, sis, just straight into it.
Yeah. No mucking around here.
Yeah. If I'm honest, I think there's been... I think one, things like that can make it not easier, but it's a moment that, and I can only really speak to Black communities, that I don't know if it's been useful, but we handle things in a different way. I'm just thinking, so most recently here in Victoria, the expose into Wayne Muir came out, and I do wonder what role Me Too has played, or like, yeah, what that, because we also had Jeff Clark years ago with ATSIC, so, and that didn't do to Jeff what this has done to Wayne. So I wonder, and that's like a sign of the times and that sort of thing, but I'm hesitant to just, I think using Me Too, which was started by a Black woman years and years ago, and then using the white one as the one, I don't want to give Alyssa Milano that, or whoever it was. I think it was her. But I think, like, Black women have been speaking out about this stuff for a while, and I guess, like, R. Kelly is a really good example, but I don't know. I definitely feel like there is more space, say now in 2019, to be able to talk about this stuff than perhaps there would have been 20 years ago. And I don't know if that's just the media, internet, and black feminism and discourse in general. So I don't know. I'm rambling, sorry.
All good words. Santilla?
I think... I will say this. I think it's a good thing that we are having conversations about feminism. I think part of my problem with the discourse around feminism is the lack of understanding of what feminism means and what bigger power structure it speaks to, which is sexism, and how that is still entrenched in our society, and how we have still not found ways of dismantling it. And I think the thing that really frustrates me about so-called popular feminism or lifestyle feminism, whatever you want to call it, is that it, again, and this is where capitalism comes in, is that it will morph into whatever, catchy, sexy, thing that people are into and make profit out of it. And it's seen as though that's what it means. And what I really worry about, particularly with my generation, is that when I think about what our foremothers were fighting for, the fact that they were fighting for working rights, the fact that they were, like all of these things, and we seem to think that somehow miraculously within our generations the struggle has ended, and therefore it's just enough to tweet about something or share something and then you're done, and not actually acknowledging that everyone has the power to change the outcome of a woman's life. I've got an article coming out tomorrow in the Saturday paper which is looking at stillbirths, and this is something that's been a very, very silent issue in this country, yet it's very, very common, and a lot of women suffer in silence as a result. And so that 6 babies every day in this country are stillborn. That rate is double if you are an Indigenous woman. If you come from a migrant refugee background, you are also disproportionately affected. If you live in a regional town, you're disproportionately affected. And there are many causal factors. So in some instances, stillbirths are unpreventable, but in others they are. And for a lot of it, it is really basic things that these women don't have access to. And there's a bit of inaction within policy in terms of getting these women the sorts of care that they need, whether it's access to antenatal services, et cetera, et cetera. We've got a federal election coming up this year, and both political parties have put forward their, platforms when it comes to dealing with stillbirths and how they think that they're going to address it. This is one thing, a tangible thing that all of us can do to contribute to the outcomes of women in this country. So if you happen to go home, you're doing a quick Google, you can look at the policies of all the major parties and look at where it aligns with your own values and see if you think it's going to benefit the women in those communities. But I think that we also we have to be very aware of the power that we have in our voices. We have to be very aware of, again, like I said, every action contributes to either hindering or helping a woman in this country. And as wonderful as it is to have these conversations, and we can kind of in some ways reinforce our own beliefs and be in our own bubbles of like, yeah, we're doing the right thing, we're having these conversations, we're engaging with them. But what happens once we head home and we shut that door? Like, it's just, I think that we need to really, really, really think about what does progress look like in 2019 if you're a woman in this country, and if you have the added disadvantage of either being Indigenous or from a migrant or refugee background or with a disability, et cetera, the lines continue, and within that you're facing further barriers. So I think we really need to, I could say a lot, but I'll stop there.
Yeah, wow, that was a lot to unpack. But yeah, it's definitely something that I think a lot of people have an issue with, finding a lot of those kind of subjects really overwhelming, especially in the stillbirth and miscarriage space, which is something that lots of women don't talk about and whatnot. And I think just having a tangible thing that they can do to help in some way, shape or form sometimes is hard for people to find. And I think these conversations can be the beginning and the start of people that don't know which direction to go to. Absolutely. Can find where they can kind of help other women in different spaces, I think. But how is, Lisy, you spoke to this a little bit just before, but I'm just interested to hear with the rest of the panel, how is the rise of popular feminism informing your work and works in general in the moving image industry?
I think in my industry specifically, we are realising that there's a big shock that women play video games, and people are just kind of figuring that out. The reason why games were targeted for men was because some marketing person in like the 60s or 70s thought this will be a good idea, we'll do the Atari and we'll market it only towards boys, and that's kind of why it's happened. But now they've realised, looking at data, there's actually women that play games. So because of that, and because obviously there's the rise of popular feminism. We're seeing, firstly, more women or non-men making games and telling their stories, which is amazing. But we're seeing games coming out that aren't all the same. They're not just the carbon copy of shooters, carbon copy of obviously we've still got big popular games like Fortnite and stuff, but we're seeing
Fortnite.
Yeah, it's a strange game.
Sorry for those who love Fortnite.
But like even locally, we had an amazing game called Florence came out recently, and it won all the Apple awards, won a bunch of mobile awards overseas, and it's a story about a relationship, and it's really quite beautiful, and it only goes for about an hour, but you get to play a game that isn't necessarily as intensive as what most people think video games are. Australia especially is telling a lot more stories that aren't traditional, which is really, really cool. And yeah, that's kind of what we're seeing in our industry at the moment. And it affects me as well, obviously. The games that we're working on, with having a strong feminine team as well as men on the team, we're having a lot more voices being heard and calling stuff out a lot earlier. Obviously, diversity means that multiple people are solving problems at the same time, which means that we can come up with really, really awesome solutions and much better products, I think, because we have a team that aren't all the same people and don't think the same way, which is really awesome.
Yeah, diversity is key in that sort of situation, I think. What about the rest of the panel?
Can I hear the question one more time?
Yeah, that's all right. So how is the rise of popular feminism informing your work and works in general in the moving image industry?
I think if we are talking about popular feminism in terms of its inclusivity for gender diverse, trans, women, non-binary people, I feel like we're not even touching the surface. There's no stories that I relate to. There's nothing. I've never had that, and I still don't. And I mean, for me now, it's like my practice is about attempting to create that or create this other world. And often my work in particular is actually just using the fantasy world as well, and mythology and cultural stories to redefine that in a different way to affirm me without having to conform into this other, this other canon of Western love stories or something like that. And that I can really weaponize this idea of fantasy. But yeah, I would say that there's like, in terms of the moving image, there is, people will talk about maybe like Pose or something, and there's trans stories that is coming out. But I think my biggest frustration deeply with a lot of that media and those narratives and those TV shows is that behind that, the core of it, it's not trans writers or gender diverse writers. We're not writing those stories from this personal conviction, and we are still being the ones invited in to play those roles instead of us inviting people into our stories, if that makes sense. I think that there's a huge dynamic that goes on between those two different avenues of being the ones who create that platform and create that story and create that narrative, opposed to someone who is telling your story or trying to replicate or imagine that for yourself. And I think that it's when you begin to, I hope I'm not going on a tangent, but when you begin to, when you begin to tell your own story and you begin to have that agency around your narrative, then a lot of social and political things, issues are kind of start to begin to reflect that in society. And I'm so apprehensive of the media that comes out about, trans people, because behind it's still laced with tokenism and all of that stuff, and we're not really benefiting from that.
Yeah, I think, authenticity and being able to create those characters is really, really important. And that's definitely something that we see in the Indigenous community as well. People constantly wanting to tell the Indigenous story, but not allowing Indigenous people to be in that space and tell those stories. It's something that like really irks me as well.
Yeah, you can feel that, right? Like it's such a huge difference. Like,
Yeah. And how important is it for both of you, Atong and Santilla, to be able to tell stories from a refugee migrant background in this space in Australia?
It's interesting that you see.
I was about to say, I'm like, the last 2 films I've made have been about Atong, so
I'm a local celebrity.
Yeah, funny that you asked that, but I will let Atong answer that question.
Oh no, I mean we can both answer it. I think that's a really awesome question because I feel like it's interesting that you say specifically popular feminism, and after like spending most of this panel so far like shitting on popular feminism, it's like, but how has it like helped you? And there is actually like a lot of positives in that. I think I was having a conversation with someone earlier this morning about I guess the parallels between like popular feminism and popular environmentalism, and this thing that's happened where we've been made to believe that we are solely responsible for the destruction of the environment as individuals, and like if we would just stop buying plastic straws, the ocean would empty itself of all its plastic. You know what I mean? And it's like, well, like, yeah, sure, like that will help, and that's awesome, and like don't buy plastic straws. There's no need for them unless you're a disabled person, or unless like there's need. That's the joke. Anyway, and in reality, as most of us know, like corporations are responsible for the vast majority of the pollution in the world, and the same corporations that are putting, hashtag no plastic straws in McDonald's or whatever it is that they're doing, we know that behind the scenes, like they're celebrating that we now will look upon them favourably, because it means that they will be able to continue to do all this horrible, destructive stuff behind the scenes because, their PR teams are excellent. And I think a similar thing has happened with feminism in that it's interesting because there is a lot of personal responsibility in feminism, so it's almost different in that way. But, let's not let Dove think that they're an awesome company because, hashtag Dove for everybody. I don't even know what it is. That they did this campaign where they had women of different body sizes, I think, which is cool. Like, I think that's great. But they still are like one of the biggest sellers of like skin bleaching products in the world. There's all of this like corporate nonsense. And I think one of the good things about that, the one positive I think about with popular feminism is that we now have access to what is happening and how these corporations think. So we now have the ability to create language and responses to that. And like, as much as Twitter activism and, Facebook activism or whatever is often derided, like there's something amazing for me personally to be able to open up something and see that Dove or McDonald's or whatever has done something that I think is terrible, but then immediately see people responding to it. Maybe not necessarily in a way that I agree with, but like having access to maybe language to point out what it is I don't like about a thing. And also like the way that popular feminism has really given social media, I don't know, like it's given us a relationship maybe to social media that can be personal. And I know for a fact that a lot of the work that I do is presented on Instagram first. That's sort of that's my gateway into the art world broadly, and a gateway for others into my personal art world. And that has really come off of like seeing all of this stuff on my newsfeed or whatever that is like nonsense to me, that does not reflect who I am, who I want to be, and doesn't reflect who's around me. And rather than like, oh, boo-hoo, it's like, well, I'm just going to like fill my feed with stuff that I want to see. And that also has led to me researching people that create the kind of content that I'm interested in. And like, now my Instagram feed, aside from ads, is like exactly what I didn't get in childhood with Australian media or like global media, really. And I think that that's happening definitely in the arts industry, and in photography as well. But to go on what Bhenji has said, like very recently there was like some article in like Vanity Fair or something about how within that like 2 or 3 year period, there had never been so many black women on the covers of magazines in God knows how many years, and leading all these campaigns, like photo campaigns and whatever. But if you do your research, out of all of those like hundreds if not thousands of campaigns and photo shoots and videos and whatever starring black women or people of colour in general, the majority of them were like photographed by white people or white men, or like who's the assistant on that photo shoot, who's directing it, who's the stylist, who's all of this. Like, I don't want us to just be the face of feminism or the face of a brand's, pat on the back, when we have talented black people who can do makeup, who can do...
That are able to take
we
all
can do
those
it all.
spaces.
We could actually just have like an entire Vogue issue that was completely done by black women. Like, you could do that and it would be fucking dope, So I feel like it's a give and a take.
That definitely needs to happen, I think.
I mean, come on. I could do it myself.
Literally everything. And the model as well.
Right?
Oh, wait, you do this ready.
So, in and through your work individually, what do you seek to build up or on? And what do you try to break down? Nayuka, I'll start with you.
Yeah, sure. I think because I've only been writing for like 3 years now, which isn't that long. Going on what Bhenji was saying, like, so I noticed when I was getting into television, I was invited into rooms. And so like the invitation, like who does the inviting has the power. So it's like the whole power, the power is always skewed in some way. And it's whether it's like onto a panel, it's like it's about who has the power to like do the inclusion. So I found like going into writers' rooms, it was to be a black person in the room, which is like fine. It was fine then because I was learning on the job, and like you get an absurd amount of money for sitting in a room. So I'm not too good for that. But I think now, and like that was really good, and I really it was good to learn, but also like there are some rooms and people I'd just be like, well, I never ever want to see you again ever in my life. I'm going to ignore you if I see you in the street. But then also like learning on the job, but we're often told that we should just be really grateful regardless of what happens. Like we should just be grateful that we get to be in a room, or like we should be grateful for any opportunity, which is like, I guess, true. It's good to be thankful, I don't know, I suppose. But it is. Like it's a privilege to be in spaces, but yeah, you often wonder why you're there in the first place. I guess to answer your question though, I think initially I was interested in writing just what I thought was important, and just to have a space for the world as I see it, or the world as I want to see it. But now I think after a few years, I mean, it'll continue to change, and like I think I'll go into law soon. I don't know how long I've got doing this sort of shit. I'm interested in I want black producers, and I don't just want to do black work in a white way. I want to work in a black way. And if that, like the Black Vogue that you were talking about, Atong, like it wouldn't just be that Vogue would be black. It would be that the way that we had Vogue would be an inherently black way of doing things. So I don't know, I guess I'm interested in like what would it mean to create a black TV show that wasn't just done in the way that white people have told us this is how to create a TV show. I mean, sure, I'm going to be late, but that's okay. No, I'm kidding. I'm interested in, there are some things I'm primarily interested in having queer black people on screen, and yeah, like if that's all I get to do in my like brief stint as a writer and like doing this sort of stuff, I'll be really, really pleased. And yeah, but I want to do it in a way that doesn't feel shit for the black people involved. I want it to be a black way of working. And I don't think it's decolonised. I think it's like a step beyond it's indigenising, and it's a step beyond just merely decolonising. It needs to be a black way of working. Anyway, I'm ranting, but yeah, that's me.
I completely forgot my own question just then because I was so deep listening into what you were saying just then, Nayuka. But for the rest of the panel, because I know that after you listen, you tend to forget the question as I just did just then. But in and through your work, what do you seek to build up or on, and what do you try to break down?
I'm just going to chime in to kind of tailgate on what you just said, Nayuka. And I apologise to anyone who was at the other panel this morning because I'm literally going to say exactly.
Was there anyone at that panel this morning?
It was one person.
Oh, that's all right.
Okay, so I'm coming up with this off the top of my head. And I think it's really important because I think one thing that we maybe didn't touch on so much yet is this idea of like decolonising this, that and the other. And I feel like I think we've kind of touched on it but not necessarily named it yet. I think we have to sort of respect what terms mean and like what they refer to. There's this really brilliant article, a journal article that I read recently, which is called Decolonization is Not a Metaphor. And it speaks to, I guess, what you're saying, Nayuka, and the fact of like, you know, there's a lot of movements to decolonize the school, decolonize feminism, decolonize how you dress and all of this, but those things don't mean that. Like that's not, decolonization is and always has been specifically about centering First Nations people in the context in which you're in, and that's not easy, and it's not fun, and it's not quick, and it's not like it's not a feel good thing. And I think within like feminism, we really need to maybe tackle that and tackle the ways in which we kind of try to broadly be feminist and take on all of these things, which kind of weakens what we're doing. And I think there's this movement also maybe within feminism where like we're told that we can do all the things ourselves in terms of the actions that we're doing and how we're practically being a feminist or whatever. And I feel like there's power in acknowledging that you don't know what you're doing sometimes. Like, I don't know what it means to, you know, exist in this space and want to be, you know, acting in a decolonial way. Okay, let me find out who knows how to do that and like listen to them and learn from them, as opposed to me like making a status that's like, you know, I'm decolonizing my day. You know,
time is a construct, first of all.
Right. I mean, essentially what I'm getting at is like if it's not centering, you know, the people of the place that you're existing in, then like it's not decolonizing. Like even if it feels good and someone says good job on you, it's like you did maybe a good thing, but like, you know, name it for what it is, and don't take up space. I don't know if that's like a good tailgate. Nay.
Yeah, no, it's deadly.
Well, I got a tailgate for you, girl. I just think it's interesting that like, I mean, I know you, like I know you guys, like that we exist, or we have a practice, we have an art practice that it's at our core a craft, and we exist as these writers or artists or dancers or whatever, and that actually just because of our cultural gender context or whatever, it becomes political, and then suddenly it's doing the work. And I feel like sometimes capitalism, especially white supremacy, will have us, I didn't say this earlier, I'm just really going off my head right now, but I just feel like it has a way of consuming our identities and then kind of like packaging them up, and then packaging what this kind of like innocence of like that craft is, and on top of that putting our identities on that, and then allowing that to be consumed, and that there's an exhaustion in that. And then that what you were talking about before about the way, something about we need to feel like that we're solely doing the work or something, or that we being I was listening. Yeah. But it's something about that idea that suddenly there's all this responsibility there, and that that things are suddenly being labeled like you're decolonizing or you're breaking down gender stereotypes. Like the first time I stepped out as like just a dancer, like the first thing the ID article wrote about me was trans icon, and I was like, whoa. I mean, I'm not gonna fight it, but now everybody says I'm a trans icon, and it's like these labels that are so easily grasped, and you taken them, and then I was just so innocently, I mean, like I was incredibly trans, but I'm firstly and foremostly like I'm bakla, which is my cultural gender role as a Filipino, and I think things can be hijacked from us, and that we should be aware of that. And I think that, you know, sometimes just existing as artists and being present and turning up is enough. And that when it comes to building up and breaking down, I think that I think, you know, of course, I started out as someone who was just trying to create a space for themselves, trying to see themselves, trying to find someone that reflected me, my sisters, and that ended up being a practice of creating community. And in doing so, there was things that were broken down, like, you know, things were decentered, people were decentered, institutions were occupied for the first time by trans women of colour. That has never happened in Sydney. Like, and I think that it's important that you just, I don't know, I think this conversation goes into like nourishing yourself and looking after yourself, but it's also about like you are enough, and that for me personally, I'm going into this year not wanting to, like, not fighting to break down these things, because I am breaking down these things already just by being here right now. Yeah.
Can I just jump in?
You can tailgate me.
Tailgate. Oh, I wish.
Later.
I think like that whole trans icon thing, and I don't know if you get it, Atong, like if you get it in gaming or if you get it in film and media, that like as soon as you make any kind of mark, you have to be the absolute best, and it's like
best,
there's no chance to be shit at what you do, like mediocre. You have to be like the best Sudanese photographer or whatever. It's
mean, which I am, but
that's not besides the point. Like, it's just, where's the room? Like, there is so much white mediocrity. Where's the room to be mediocre and to get better as you go on, rather than being a fucking icon as soon as you start?
Yeah.
I know. Does anyone else feel that?
I have a good analogy. I call myself Hannibal Lecter, because I feel like I'm the ones that I get put on the thing and carted out and paraded around because I'm a successful woman in games. And and I'm like, okay, it's time. I have to get out and put the mask on and like get out and perform. Like, that's in my mind. This is
Hannibal Lecter.
That's what I call myself. I'm very.
And I've started eating my colleagues.
I know, it's super strange. But yeah, it's really difficult. Like, I feel like I'm very privileged. I have a lot of privilege. I've been very fortunate for my career, and then I was very naive, I feel, early on, because I was given a lot of opportunities, and then I kind of realized, I was like, oh, it's because I'm a woman. It's because there's not many of us, and because they found one that I can talk, I can do public speaking, and we have a lot of introverts in our industry. I have an ego. I can talk. I love performing. I love getting out in front of people. Therefore, I'm an easy win. And then there was this moment where I, once again, very privileged, received an award that I was not expecting to get. And I was angry. I was really angry about getting it, because what the original award was meant for a Rising Star Award. It was meant to be there to be like, hey, we're going to celebrate the next generation of our industry. And I thought, that's great. I had nominated someone. I had hoped that person would win. And then they turned it into an advocacy award. And I was just like, I had this moment when I was like, oh, you just want to remind the industry that you are doing your best. There are people here trying to fix the industry. Look at this person. Look at Hannibal Lecter. They're out there trying to do it. You don't need to look at the fact that we're all men running this industry. Mm-hmm. And that's what it feels like sometimes. And it gives me such I ended up crying because I was very, very drunk, because I didn't expect to win anything. Side note, very, very drunk at this stage. And I was angry. I was just like, why are they making this? Like, I obviously should be excited about it, but I wasn't. And then I felt like a brat, because I was like, this was not meant for me. This was meant for someone else that hasn't got a voice. I don't need that at the moment. I get invited to things, and I'm very, very fortunate for that. And I really frustrated because then I'm like, well, I'm just complaining. I'm this like privileged person complaining about getting awards. And then it's a cycle. It's very, very complicated. And like, I obviously want to be there to support women and potentially be a role model. But then I also don't want to take the place of someone else that can also speak as well. Like, it's this constant battle of, should I be there to represent or should I step back? And it's really tough. I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. What are we talking about again?
Sorry, yeah, sorry.
No, it's just really, yeah.
No, it's perfectly fine.
Yeah.
Wonderful discussion. Santilla?
Just two things. Something that Bhenji said and something that Nayuka said. And I think, Bhenji, you talked about how not, thinking that not being represented and not having, but then also by virtue of existing, that becomes political. And I wasn't really... this is going to sound really strange when I say it, but I knew I'm black and of African descent, but I didn't know that meant anything until I started working in the media. And when I was a kid, I wanted to tell stories. I love stories, and I'm still a nerd about it. And when I entered journalism, I naively thought that I could just be like every other journalist. Like, I could just walk into a newsroom and I could go to a presser, and that would be my experience. But every time I'd show up, it would just be a different reaction. So it would be things like people asking if I was at the right place or whatever. But then also it editorially, it started with the things that I was being assigned, that apparently only someone like me could do them. And early on, I really pushed back on that, because I sort of thought, well, I'm more than my identity, obviously. And I wanted to be seen for, what everyone else was, a journalist. And it was a lot, because I had to keep proving myself and it's like, it's crazy. It's like you're chasing something, and every time you feel like you've got there, the goalposts are moved again, and then you have to sort of catch up to that. And so once I realized that, okay, the only way that I could have some kind of say in how this all worked, I had to acknowledge that there were bigger structures working against me. So one was racism, the other was sexism. And how that was manifesting was in different ways with different people, different things. And so then I sort of said, okay, how do I place myself in a situation where I at least feel like I am in control of my life, not where someone else is putting me in a position where I'm just, a puppet on the string. And so for me, that meant, how do I start to control the narrative? And that led me to film. And then entering the film industry, again, women are very underrepresented. And when you talk, I direct and write films, so when you put that into it, we're tiny. And then thinking about whose stories are you telling, who are you representing, and all that sort of thing. But also the lens by which people are interrogating my work. Nayuka talked about not having the freedom to just be mediocre or average, and I can honestly say I've never felt I triple check my work, like because I feel like I just don't have the room to make a mistake, because there is this expectation. And especially because with my filmmaking career, a lot of it has been through initiatives and through all this sort of thing. So it's like, on the one hand, you're being propped up, whether it's through a Gender Matters initiative or a cultural initiative, and this expectation that whatever you make is going to be, something that everyone's proud of. And so you can't really let people down, if you know what I mean. And also that thing of like, well, if I mess this up, the next Black African person after me might not get this opportunity. And so I think I've just come to a place where I now recognize that this is going to be my experience. I think it's going to be like this, and I have can't change it. It is what it is. But what I do hope is that for younger generations, whether it's young girls growing up in this country that want to either enter the media industry or film and television, and come from a diverse range of backgrounds, they can have that freedom to make whatever they want to make and be as mediocre as they want to. And so that's why I just kind of just keep going and take it on the chin, really.
Well, speaking to Santilla and all of the things that you said, which was amazing, I just wanted to ask each of the panel members, in taking up the responsibility of speaking and using your voice in varying art spaces, how do you cope with the emotional labour involved in producing your work? Does anyone want to start?
I started seeing a therapist this week for the first time ever,
Oh,
which is very,
yes.
yeah, I finally did it. Like, it was very, very important. And yeah, I didn't cry, so I was very happy. But I also have a very, very good support network. So I have some very close friends, either here or back in Brisbane, that I talk to and have. And actually, my mum just tried to call me before, and I was like, "Sorry, mum, I'm gonna go." But having a support network is like, that's me. Also, massages. I try and get a massage like as often as I can, if I can afford it. Yeah.
What about everyone else? Things that you do for self-care, for the emotional labour that we have to go through, doing the things that we do, being in the spotlight like we are?
I think I'm very bad at self-care because I live off rage. I know that sounds really terrible, but I actually do. Like, a lot of things make me angry, and then that adds to my motivation, and that makes me work. So I function and I'm motivated by rage. So how do I self-care? I don't. I know that's yeah. And
Yeah, I find it really hard to write if I'm not angry. Like, the output is just shit house.
Yeah.
I have a therapist. His name's Jacques. I've recommended him to so many people. I saw him the other day and he was like, I can't take any more people. But if you do need one...
Do you get a coupon if you like...
I was like, bruh, where's my finder's fee?
Yeah.
But like, he sent me an email. He's like, refer your friends to these people because they can't take any more people. But he's real deadly. Sometimes if people... I know people say don't feed the trolls, but sometimes the trolls like are funny.
Yes.
They do real... Like, sometimes it's... Most of the time, I don't even look at my notifications unless it's people I know.
Where's my DM that I
Yeah,
got?
go on, Lisy.
Do you want me to read my DM that I got just before?
Yeah.
Go on, please.
So I'm going to read out. Sorry for the swears in advance.
What's the context?
So I have a feature in the App Store. Very, very, if you have an iPhone, you will see my face. It's there. It has my name right next to it, which is also very searchable, obviously. And so I got this message from Rob.
Okay.
You're one ugly motherfucking filthy Asian lesbian cunt. The first thing I see when I open the App Store. Fucking please. And I posted it on Twitter. I thought it was hilarious. Actually, it made me laugh. It was like, I thought it was hilarious. And I actually posted it on Twitter and I said, Happy International Women's Day. And that's that to me that's hilarious. It didn't make me angry, but it just made me like, how do you know I was gay? Like, I didn't really... I know, like, that was really weird. It was very specific.
I mean, you are wearing Birkenstocks tonight.
I know, yeah. But the article was like, I was like, was it the peach jacket? I don't know. It was very funny. It was funny. That's the one thing I read from it. I was like, oh my goodness, how did he know? And like, I went down that spiral. I did try and find out where he worked. That was like my first thing. I was like, can I find out where this person works? But I couldn't. But it was pretty funny. All you can do is laugh. There's like literally nothing else you can do.
Rob's got stronger gaydar than I do.
Yeah. Warwick, Queensland. What's up?
Therapy, laugh at the dickheads. And also just like read good stuff. Like we all think that what we go through is like so new and like no one knows how I feel. But like Audre Lorde wrote this shit. No, seriously, like there is no new feeling. Like there are only new ways to feel. Like there are only new ways to communicate racism, and like racism just evolves or develops new technology, but the feeling is still the same. So like there are people, we have a whole canon of people that we can read and go to to feel better about ourselves, or to get words of wisdom. So I think, reading. I just bought Lisa. Lisa Bellier. I forget. I don't know how to say her last name. I always see it written down, but I never hear people say it. Anyway, she was an Aboriginal queer poet and photographer and just staunch warrior. But I picked up her book of poetry. I found it on Book Depository. And it's so comforting to read the words of a queer black woman, words from 20 years ago. And there was one poem, she was like, asking permission to scream. And then she was like, I'll clean up any mess I make after screaming. And I was like, oh. Like,
spoke to you.
It's all there. Like it's all there. Anyway.
Just quickly, Bhenji and Atong, before we go to Q&A, any self-care that you guys adhere to?
Well, by the end of 2018, I was done. Like, I was very much done. And I thought that maybe actually I wasn't the only one. And there were so many women around me that were so done that they actually felt like they had nothing. And women who I know that have been doing so much work felt like they had done nothing. And I feel like that is sometimes that's how white supremacy capitalism works. It has you feel like you've done nothing, but you need to do more. And I felt like that this year I needed to be constantly reminded of like who I am. So like, just like I put a shout out to Facebook. I was like, who am I? Remind me. I feel like I don't exist. And it's something that about living also in, you know, a colonial state, about this, like everything is, the reality is altered about who you are, your identity. Do you exist? Is this a reality? And it's such a body disassociation. So for me, I mean, dance is actually my therapy. Voguing is actually my therapy. I step into that room and I have to get it out with my sisters. So that is really like, it's a bodily thing. And I feel like that we have to understand that like all of our bodies are carrying so much politically, and there's so much weight in our muscles and our flesh, and ancestrally there's so much that we're carrying as well with us, that we have to do the work of the massages or the dancing or anything that can reconnect us with the senses, because like disassociation is real, and it will really have you feel like you don't have a reality to stand on, especially in the world where you don't have a reality to reflect you as well. And that if you're the one doing that work, then that's a whole other thing as well. Yeah,
exactly.
I'll be a bit quick because everything that everyone said is like, damn, okay, let me like get some more tools in my tool belt. I was really lucky in high school to come across a book called The Queer Art of Failure by Jack Halberstam, which ironically Bhenji and I did a panel about that book a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
But that book for me was really pivotal and really important in that it kind of helped me to reposition the way that I look at, you know, how I see myself as a person who does live in a politicized body in a politicized world, and all this pressure, like we've all spoken about on this panel, this idea of having to constantly be excellent and never being allowed to have an off day, because a lot of us are kind of like the public face of a lot of things that we represent, and that's a lot of pressure, and it's not very good for your mental health to become like the stand for who you are in your community. Anyway, the book kind of talks a lot about a lot of things in really heavy ways, but there's a lot of chapters that sort of position failure as like a really awesome thing individually, and like there is opportunity in failure to, you know, learn and grow and whatever, but also to just like sit in it and be like, okay, yeah, I failed, and what? Like, what does that mean? What does it actually mean to fail in a failed world? It means that you're just doing what that world has given you. And, you know, the idea of like, for me, I don't feel bad about being sad a lot of the time, because this is a really sad world a lot of the time. And Octavia Butler as well, who was an amazing science fiction writer, she spoke a lot in interviews about like how sick the world that we live in is, because of colonialism and all of that stuff. And she gave herself permission to be angry and to be upset and to be sad and to be unhappy, because it just sort of to her did not make sense to be constantly ecstatic with the reality of the world we live in. It's like, if you're in a sick world, of course you're going to be sick at times, and celebrate like those moments when you do feel awesome and feel like motivated to create and to like, you know, have really awesome times with friends and family or whatever. But the pressure to constantly perform joy is like complete bullshit. That's my self-care.
That's wonderful self-care. A big thank you to all of you, but we have some people in the audience that have questions. Here's our Q&A. Please don't be scared. There's our first.
So, going off that.
Hey, felt the pressure to kick this off. So either looking back or looking forwards, what, pick one or the other, don't have to be both. But what would either you go back and tell your younger self, or what would you want yourself in the future to know?
Oh, God.
Just a few words to, how you can sometimes write a letter back to a younger version of you or forward to the future.
To relax, it's going to be okay. I think I spent a lot of my teenage years just being really anxious and worrying, and obviously when you're growing up you go through the growing pains of trying to fit in and body image and insecurities and not being the prettiest in the room and all that sort of stuff, and just kind of recognizing that as you are is enough, and it took a while for me to be comfortable in that part of my femininity, but once I got there it's been great. But I just be myself and just be comfortable in that body and enjoy it while I'm still young, and not spend too much time wishing that I was something else.
I would say you're so hot. Like, oh my God, like you're so hot. Actual political, desire politics, fuck that shit, because you're so hot and you just have to carry it. We've talked about this, Nayuka. We're so hot. You're just so hot. There's nothing to be said, and I think that just gives you permission to live your life. You know what I mean? Because when you're growing up and you have all these ideas of, I'm not even gonna go into this shit. You're just so hot,
Don't look at me like that. I think I would tell my younger self, and by that I mean me 5 minutes ago, me 2 hours ago as well, to just not give in to guilt. I have this huge guilt complex, which I think a lot of people probably relate to, and this idea that those burdens and those responsibilities placed on you are placed on you for a reason. And I grew up in a very Catholic household, so there is this whole God will not give you what you cannot handle, and that's not my God. You're allowed to say no and fuck that, and I'm good. And just to go on that as well, when it comes to emails, you're allowed to be honest. You can be honest in an email. If you're I'm not feeling it, I'm not feeling it. Or if you need to have an extension, I need an extension, as opposed to if you look through my inbox, almost every email is hi, apologies for the delay, or apologies for this, or I'm so sorry for this and I hate to inconvenience you. And it's I'm not inconveniencing you with my existence. It's not my fault that I'm sick or whatever. Permission.
Period.
I think just for my high school and mainly high school self, is that the expectations that I thought I were holding, my parents had for me, that they didn't exist. They're all in my head. I always thought that my parents expected me, or my mum specifically expected me to do certain things in life. It wasn't real. It was all just in my head. I just kind of thought that that's what she wanted me to do. And when we had that realization together, when I was in my mid-20s, early 20s, it was very, very... what's the word, relieving, because I thought that she wanted me to be a doctor or a lawyer or something, and turns out she just wanted me to be happy. So that was really nice when I realized that. And I didn't realize that for a long time, because I thought she was a bitch. So when I was in high school, I hated my mum, so as most people would probably relate to.
I think a couple of things, wear that condom in Berlin. It's going to come back to bite you. And also, I think particularly being a young black fella, and all of the relationships around me, they either didn't last very long or they were quite dysfunctional. Just because your security isn't the only thing that matters, and not mistreated isn't necessarily the best relationship. Just because you're not being hurt, happy you're capable of. I think all young black people actually need to hear that, particularly young black girls. Like, you can be happy in a relationship and you can be fulfilled. It's not just the first person that comes along that isn't the worst thing in the world. Like, you can't, I mean, if you want a relationship, good, but yeah, just because you might not see it, and I fucking hate those ranting. I hate those things that are like, you can't be it until you see it. Because, well, if that was the case, we would never have the first thing of anything. Because we'd all just be, you know, like, you actually can go and do it, even if you haven't seen it before. So that's it, yes.
Next question.
I kind of wanted to mask a book recommendation as a question because you're all touching on it earlier. Have any of you read Bell Hooks' Eating the Other? Because it's all about what you were talking about, and you were talking about good reading, and I feel like you should all go and read it now.
Thank you.
Was there a question?
Well, have you read it? It's really just, it's a book recommendation.
I thought you were asking for a recommendation.
No.
But you
all
pretend
talked
that
about
is
the
also your
themes.
question. You should pretend that is also your question.
Yeah. Do you have book recommendations, actually?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
I want to know you, Atong.
I mean, I'm looking at you, Nayuka. I've got heaps, actually. I'll just list, like, maybe just one. And then, I don't know, I'll do, like, an Instagram thing or something. Everyone does that now. But I think that every single person should read literally anything by Octavia Butler. Just anything. Like, close your eyes and, like, Google Octavia Butler books and just go like this, and then 1, 2, 3, stop, and then read that book. You won't be disappointed.
Any other recommendations from our panel?
I've just, in terms of, like, there are just so many good books in the world, and it makes me sad that I'm going to die and I'm not going to be able to read all the books that I want to read in the world. Sorry. But I've just started, just got through the introduction of Talking Up to the White Woman, which I'd put off for a long time because I thought, because Eileen Moulton Robinson's really smart, that it was just too thing for me, but it's actually really, really fucking brilliant. So I would recommend that.
I have a really short attention span and I'm really bad at reading books. I listen to audiobooks and podcasts.
That counts.
Yeah,
audiobooks count.
Yeah. Is there an audiobook or a podcast that you would recommend?
I feel really dumb up here. Like, I feel very, very self-conscious. Like, I watched The Star Is Born on the weekend. It was really bad. It was so, I did not like it. But, like, if you're interested in creative industries, I ignore the fact that the John Lasseter exists in this company. There's a book called Creativity Inc., which is by the founders of Pixar, and it's about the way they built Toy Story and the way they built WALL-E and stuff, which is really, really awesome. But you have to ignore, because they go on about, I got really angry listening to it because they go on about how great they are at, like, understanding their team and stuff, but meanwhile, like, a bunch of women being sexually harassed at the time. But it's really, really awesome if you are interested in Pixar movies and that stuff. I really liked it.
Are we good?
I don't have any book recommendations.
I didn't have to say anything.
Because everything I'm reading is very research-based. So, yeah, I can't remember the last time I read anything for fun, which is really sad, I know, but, yeah. I enjoy it though.
I have read.
But it's not pleasurable reads, if I can put it that way.
What about you, Bhenji?
Yeah, nothing has hit me of lately, but, you know, just the typical, just like Cruising Utopia, Jose Esteban Munoz. Like, if you haven't read that, just, it's the Bible. Just like, you have to, it literally is in my bag, and I just like go back to it. And like, he's of the school of thought of like Fred Moten, the Undercommons, that's also like prolific and amazing, and and that's it.
Cool. No worries. Any more questions? Oh, a bunch. All of a sudden. Goodness me.
I got a Vogue workshop in a minute. I need to
one
leave.
more question up here, but you will get a chance to chat to all of our amazing guests downstairs as we drink and dance the rest of the night away.
Who's the lucky last?
Hello. I mean, this was kind of tacking onto the next one, but I guess, or previous one, what do you recommend as really important reads for understanding, like, your perspective, I guess, or like something that you would suggest for people who don't really like know the backgrounds of like cultures that they're not part of, or like as sort of minority positions, or like all that kind of stuff? Like, what do you recommend? What do you think is a really powerful and helpful read for people who want to understand, I guess? Or not even just read, like anything, whether it's an article or fucking whatever.
I'm going to use this as a shameless plug opportunity to plug my body of work. I mean, I make everything from radio, podcasts, films. I write, and it's all there. And I use different forms of language. So there's things that are very simple and accessible, and there are things that are a little bit more theoretical. And when you're ready, you can read that work as well. But it's there, and so yeah.
I'm going to have like a controversial opinion or comment. Do you have a Twitter account? Because, okay, get a Twitter account, or like, I don't know, have a look through, because I feel like I can't recommend a single book because it's like, you know, there's such like a broad bunch of cultures that exist in the world, and I think the most that I've learned is from people within those cultures, and not everybody, you know, is able to get a book deal, and not everybody who has a book deal is like, you know, the best voice or the most, you know, excellent representation. And I think the most powerful stuff I've learned is from people on the internet. Like Twitter, Tumblr's still dope even though people tease it. Facebook is still going off even though it's just for, you know, aunts and uncles.
They're like Facebook Live, having the wedding or whatever.
I don't think I've ever found a book that represents my story yet. I don't think.
Download her app.
It's a game. It doesn't represent me at all. It's about animals. So
No,
it's
it
like,
Sis,
yeah.
you're a terrible business lady. Right now.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's like a weird question. Not that I'm reading you or anything, like as in like shading you or anything, because it's like, how do I access like these communities or something? But like, yeah, I mean, yeah, again, like it's hard, especially for my community, because everyone says they've watched Paris is Burning, and it's like the most problematic film out there. Thank you, Jenny Livingston, for like exploiting so much of like my grandparents. But I would say if you want to understand ballroom culture the way I have understood ballroom culture, you have to go to the YouTube channel Ballroom Throwbacks, Ballroom Throwback TV, which is almost 15 years old YouTube channel of like literally videos from, I would say, like this like late 80s, 90s VHS to currently present, and I mean present like yesterday's balls that happened yesterday, and it's an archive, and it's like the most valuable thing that we have as a community, because that's where our history exists and lives, and that's how we've learnt about the women who've come before us and who they are and whose daughters were whom, and it's funny that we exist on this platform, because it's just like there's it's not funny. I think it's just incredible that this platform was created by us, and it was this very small gesture into just for the community, and now it's the archive. Ballroom Throwback TV.
Nayuka?
I think like Atong, I spend a lot of time on the internet, and I think like we're not just one identity, we're made up of so many things that are impossible to capture in one book. But I would like, yeah, Twitter, and then who am I retweeting and why are they so deadly? Yeah, I don't know. It's like, I think it's impossible, but there are some incredible people. Like if we're talking about blackfellas, I would follow the work of Chelsea Bond. She's really deadly. And also I would listen to the podcast, her and Lena. details. Hurley, they have wild black women. I think a lot of my perspectives and humour come from being a black person who grew up in Queensland. So listening to that podcast would explain a bit. Yeah.
We should do a plug, like an actual ACMI plug, and y'all can follow everyone, and then we can have like little networks and grow that somehow. Yeah.
Yep. Well, thank you so much to our amazing panel for the insightful conversations that we had tonight. Nayuka, Santilla, Lisy, Bhenji and Atong, thank you so much.
And thank you to you, Leila.
Aw, thanks.
You're incredible.
And I hope you enjoy the rest of your night, ladies and gentlemen.